A powerful crime boss had tested countless people for years. Again and again he pretended to have fallen from power, pretended to be broke, pretended to be betrayed, pretended to have nothing left to offer except himself. After a shattered marriage, after the woman who once swore to love him walked away and took the last of his trust with her, Vincent Moretti made one cold vow. He would never let anyone love him for his money again. So he turned every relationship into a test, and everyone failed. Some turned their backs the moment they heard he was struggling. Some disappeared after a single night. One even laughed at him when she thought he had lost everything. Then he met Emily Thompson, a single mother living in a broken slum on the south side of Chicago. A woman working herself to the bone day and night just to keep food on the table and a roof over her children's heads. A woman with every reason to hate wealthy men, every reason to reject a dangerous stranger, every reason to walk away. But on that rainy night when she collapsed onto the street, her food spilling into the puddles, her eyes burning with helplessness, Emily did not beg for money, did not ask for pity, did not curse fate. She simply knelt down in silence and picked up every dirty scrap of food to take home to her children. And for the first time in years, the stone heart of Vincent Moretti trembled. He had millions of dollars, armored cars, a penthouse overlooking the entire city, dozens of men willing to die at his command. But the trembling woman beneath that streetlight made him feel poorer than ever before. Tonight would be the final test. If she passed, he would tell her the whole truth. If she failed, he would disappear from her life as if he had never existed. But as he stood there watching that frail mother hold her sleeping children inside a freezing apartment, Vincent realized the one thing that stole his breath. What if she passed the test and hated him for creating it? Before we continue, leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for the next chapter. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the quiet world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. The rain fell in relentless sheets over the south side of Chicago that night, turning cracked sidewalks into shallow rivers that reflected the flickering neon of a distant corner store sign. Wind howled between the rows of run-down brick buildings, many with boarded-up windows and sagging roofs that had not seen proper repairs in years. In one of the most forgotten corners of the city, where poverty clung like a second skin, lived a young woman named Emily Thompson. Emily was barely 30. Fair-skinned with tired hazel eyes that had seen far too much hardship for her age. She had grown up in these very streets, the daughter of parents who worked long hours at factories that eventually closed, leaving behind empty lots overgrown with weeds and broken dreams. Now she was a single mother raising her 10-year-old son, Tommy, alone in a tiny freezing apartment on the upper floor of a decaying 3-flat building. The walls were thin, the heat unreliable, and the rent always late. Her clothes hung loose on her thin, malnourished frame. Sleep was a luxury she rarely afforded, her face pale and drawn from endless double shifts at a greasy spoon diner and occasional night cleaning jobs. Tommy was a quiet boy with the same fair skin as his mother and a mop of unruly brown hair. He often wore the same faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap, a hand-me-down from a neighbor who had moved away years ago. The boy helped as much as a child could, carrying groceries up the stairs or warming cans of soup on the unreliable stove when the electricity flickered. But the weight of their life pressed heavily on both of them. Many nights, Emily would sit by the cracked window after Tommy finally fell asleep, staring out at the empty streets, her hands trembling from exhaustion and the constant gnawing fear of what tomorrow might bring. Eviction notices had already appeared twice that year. Medical bills for Tommy's frequent respiratory infections caused by the damp, moldy apartment piled up like accusations on the wobbly kitchen table. Emily's poverty was absolute and humiliating in its everyday cruelty. She skipped meals so Tommy could eat, her stomach aching with hunger that made her dizzy and weak. Cold wind seeped through gaps in the window frames during bitter Chicago winters, forcing her to layer old blankets and worn sweaters until she could barely move. She had sold almost everything of value long ago: a small silver cross necklace that once belonged to her grandmother, a few pieces of mismatched furniture. What remained was a life stripped bare, A handful of thrift store clothes, a single pair of cracked shoes with holes in the soles, and the fierce, quiet determination to keep her son safe no matter the cost. Unreasonable and unjust situations seemed to follow her like shadows. The diner manager docked her pay for minor mistakes caused by exhaustion. Landlords threatened eviction without mercy. Neighbors sometimes looked the other way when shady figures lingered near the building, preying on the vulnerable. Emily endured it all with soft, timid politeness. When speaking to those in authority, her voice barely above a whisper, eyes downcast in guarded fear mixed with a flicker of curiosity about whether anyone truly saw her struggle. Later that night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Emily clutched a thin jacket around her shoulders and hurried home from her evening shift, her feet aching in the rain-soaked shoes. She carried a small bag with leftover scraps of food the diner cook had quietly slipped her. Her mind raced with worry. Tommy was home alone, and the building's hallway light had burned out again, leaving the stairs in darkness. A sudden shout from an alleyway made her freeze. Two rough-looking men were arguing loudly, one shoving the other against a graffiti-covered wall. Emily's heart pounded with anxiety and horror. She quickened her pace, but in her haste, her foot slipped on the wet pavement. She stumbled, the bag tearing open, the meager food scattering into puddles. Pain shot through her ankle as she felt numbness spreading from the shock and cold. For a moment, the world spun in dizzy disorientation. She sat there on the sidewalk, tears mixing with rain, feeling utterly powerless and alone. The unfairness of it all tore at her insides, a good mother doing everything right, yet punished at every turn. Her inner turmoil swelled into a consuming wave of despair. How much longer could she protect Tommy from this life? Unbeknownst to Emily, another man moved through the shadows of Chicago that same night. Vincent Moretti was a powerful, fair-skinned American man in his early 40s, born and raised in the city's tough neighborhoods, before rising to control a vast construction and real estate empire that served as legitimate face of his deeper operations. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, and silver threading through his dark hair, Vinny projected calm authority from his sleek downtown office overlooking the glittering skyline. His wealth was immense, luxurious penthouses, fleets of vehicles, private security, but it came at a steep emotional cost. The mafia world he navigated demanded constant vigilance, ruthless decisions, and a heart hardened against betrayal. Vinny's inner struggles ran deep and violent. Years earlier, his ex-wife had discovered the full extent of his life and left in a storm of accusations and legal threats, taking what she could and leaving him with a gnawing guilt that never fully faded. He had built walls of steel around his heart, testing everyone around him by occasionally feigning financial strain or weakness in deals, to see who remained loyal and who revealed their true greedy nature. Remorse consumed him in quiet moments. Remorse for the choices that distanced him from any chance of normal family life, for the violence he had witnessed and sometimes ordered in the name of protection and power. His emotional conflict raged like an internal storm. The powerful man who could command rooms full of hardened men felt utterly hollow when alone, haunted by the fear that no one could ever care for him beyond what he could provide or protect against. That night, Vinny was returning from a tense meeting in a dimly lit warehouse on the industrial edge of the South Side. His black SUV moved slowly through the rain-slicked streets, flanked by two trusted men in another vehicle. Suddenly, raised voices and the glint of metal caught his attention. A street confrontation was unfolding. A rival faction from a competing crew had ambushed one of his lower-level associates near the alley where Emily had fallen. The rivals shouted demands for territory, and respect, their words sharp and threatening. Vinny's jaw tightened. He stepped out into the rain, his expensive coat instantly darkening with water, and approached with measured steps. No excessive violence erupted, but the tension crackled like electricity. Words were exchanged in low, intense tones. Vinny's presence alone shifted the balance. His reputation as a man who protected his own carried weight. The rivals backed down after a few heated moments, melting back into the shadows with muttered curses, but the air remained thick with unspoken threats. Vinny helped his associate to safety, his mind already calculating the next moves to prevent escalation. As his men handled the aftermath, Vinny's gaze drifted further down the block. There, under the weak glow of a street lamp, he saw her, Emily, still sitting on the wet pavement, gathering scattered food scraps with shaking hands, her thin frame shivering violently. Something in the scene struck him like a physical blow. The image of this destitute woman, so clearly at the absolute edge of endurance, stirred a fierce inner conflict within him. His wealth and power suddenly felt grotesque against her visible misery. Guilt gnawed at him sharper than usual here. He was a man who could move mountains of concrete and steel across the city, while someone so vulnerable suffered unnoticed in the very neighborhoods his empire touched. A consuming remorse flooded his chest, not just for this moment, but for all the times he had looked away from similar suffering to maintain his control. He approached slowly, his voice calm and steady despite the storm inside. "Miss, are you all right?" Emily looked up, her hazel eyes wide with a mix of fear, guarded suspicion, and confusion. Her voice came out soft and timid, polite even in her distress. I'm fine, sir. Thank you. Just a little slip." She tried to stand, but dizziness made her sway, pain flashing across her face. Vinny offered a hand, careful not to overwhelm her. In that instant, as their eyes met, an overwhelming surge of protective instinct hit him with shocking intensity. It was not romance, but something deeper and more primal. A fierce, passionate determination to shield this woman and her child from the cruelty that had defined her life. The emotion hit him like a wave, creating a compelling focal point in his hardened heart. For the first time in years, the powerful mafia boss felt a genuine pull toward compassion and responsibility, clashing violently with his carefully constructed emotional walls. Emily accepted the help with hesitant curiosity, her mind reeling in shock and disorientation. Who was this well-dressed stranger offering aid in a place where kindness was rare? Horror and anxiety mixed with a numb gratitude. As he ensured she reached her building safely, his men discreetly watching from afar. Vinny did not linger long, but as he drove away later that night, the image of her thin, exhausted figure burned in his mind. His inner turmoil grew increasingly intense. Guilt and remorse clawed at him. How many others like her had his world indirectly harmed through the cycles of power and neglect in these streets? The contrast between his luxurious life, warm penthouses, fine meals, security, and her humiliating poverty tore at him with violent emotional force. Weeks later, the encounter refused to leave Vinny's thoughts. He made quiet inquiries through trusted channels, learning the depths of Emily's situation without her knowledge. The unfairness of it all fueled his growing resolve. Meanwhile, in the cramped apartment, Emily tucked Tommy into bed one evening, her voice soft as she reassured him that things would improve. Tommy, sensing her worry, hugged her tightly. "Mom, we'll be okay, right?" His innocent words only deepened her inner torment. Fierce love for her son mixed with the humiliating reality of their powerlessness. She lay awake that night, cold wind whistling through the cracks, tears silent on her cheeks, feeling the weight of every unjust setback that had stripped her life to its barest bones. For Vinny, the nights became battles of conscience. Sitting alone in his elegant downtown space, surrounded by symbols of success, he felt the consuming remorse intensify. The powerful man who commanded loyalty through strength now questioned the emptiness of that strength. A new, deep emotional conflict took root, the drive to protect and provide clashing with the fear that opening himself to genuine responsibility might expose old wounds. Yet the memory of Emily's timid politeness and Tommy's vulnerable presence stirred something healing in him, a quiet, condensed emotional stillness amid the chaos hinting at the possibility of redemption through compassion. The stage was set in the shadows of Chicago. A destitute mother fighting for survival, a powerful mafia boss wrestling with his soul, and a young boy caught between two worlds. What began as a chance encounter on a rain-soaked street would soon draw them together in ways none could yet imagine, testing the limits of protection, responsibility, and the human capacity for healing. Next morning, the weak Chicago sunlight filtered through the cracked window of Emily Thompson's tiny apartment, casting long shadows across the threadbare carpet. Emily woke with a start, her thin body aching from the fall the night before. Her ankle throbbed with a dull, persistent pain that made every step feel like walking on broken glass. She had barely slept, the cold wind seeping through the gaps in the walls, keeping her shivering under a pile of old blankets that smelled of damp and desperation. Tommy was already awake, sitting at the wobbly kitchen table with a small bowl of watered-down cereal, his Chicago Cubs baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. The boy looked up at his mother with quiet concern, his young face reflecting the same exhaustion that etched deep lines around Emily's hazel eyes. "Mom, your foot—" "It looks bad," Tommy said softly. Emily forced a gentle smile, her voice timid and polite even in her own home. "It is nothing, sweetheart. I will be fine. You eat your breakfast." Inside, her heart tore with violent intensity. The humiliation of her poverty pressed down on her like a physical weight. Malnourished and sleep-deprived, she could barely stand straight without dizziness washing over her. Last night's spilled food meant another skipped meal for her so Tommy could have something in his stomach. Unreasonable and unjust, the world seemed determined to break her. The landlord had slipped another notice under the door overnight, threatening eviction within weeks if the back rent was not paid. How was she supposed to protect her son when every day brought new cruelties? Later that morning, Emily limped to the diner for her shift, her cracked shoes soaking up puddles from the previous night's rain. The manager barked orders without mercy, docking her pay for arriving a few minutes late due to her injured ankle. Customers were rude, the tips meager. One older regular, seeing her pale face and trembling hands, quietly pushed a few extra dollars across the counter. Emily accepted them with soft gratitude, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, sir. That is very kind." Yet even this small act of decency highlighted the absurdity of her situation, relying on the kindness of strangers while her own life unraveled in slow, humiliating increments. By the end of the shift, exhaustion made her vision blur with numbness. She leaned against the counter for a moment of quiet, emotional stillness, fighting back tears that threatened to spill. Weeks later, Vincent Moretti sat in the leather chair of his downtown penthouse office, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Chicago's glittering skyline. The room spoke of immense wealth: polished mahogany desks, original artwork on the walls, and a private bar stocked with the finest spirits. Yet the powerful mafia boss felt none of it. His fair-skinned face was drawn blue eyes, shadowed with gnawing remorse that had only grown sharper since that rainy night. The image of Emily Thompson, thin, shivering, gathering scattered food from the pavement, haunted him. His inner turmoil raged with violent conflict. Here he was, a man who commanded construction empires and moved through the city's underbelly with unchallenged authority. Yet he could not erase the memory of her powerless desperation. Consuming guilt tore at him. What right did he have to such luxury while a mother and her child suffered so close by? The protective instinct that had surged in him that night burned even hotter now. An overwhelming, passionate attachment that had nothing to do with romance, and everything to do with a deep, almost fatherly need to shield the vulnerable. It clashed violently with the hardened walls he had built after his ex-wife's betrayal, creating a storm of emotional upheaval that left him restless and tormented. Vinny's pattern of testing those around him continued with ruthless precision. In tense boardroom meetings, he would casually mention cash flow problems on a major construction project, watching closely for any flicker of disloyalty or opportunistic greed in his associates. Most failed. Some shifted uncomfortably and offered weak excuses. Others subtly distanced themselves, their eyes revealing calculations of self-interest. Each failure reinforced his deep-seated cynicism, but now it felt hollow. The tests no longer brought satisfaction, only sharper remorse. Later that afternoon, another street confrontation unfolded unexpectedly on the south side. Vinny had driven there himself in an unmarked car to check on one of his legitimate building sites. Without warning, members of a rival faction appeared, blocking the street with 2 vehicles. Voices rose in bold, heated accusations over territory and respect. Vinny stepped out calmly, his powerful presence commanding attention. The rivals demanded concessions, their words sharp and threatening, but no weapons were drawn. The tension crackled like live wires. Vinny responded with measured authority, his voice steady despite the inner storm. "This is not the way. We talk like men who know the cost of blood on these streets." After several long, suspense-filled minutes, the rivals backed down, peeling away with frustrated glares. Vinny's heart pounded not from fear, but from the growing realization that his world of power offered no real protection for people like Emily and Tommy. The contrast between his ability to diffuse danger and Emily's utter helplessness tore at him with fresh intensity. That same evening, Emily faced yet another absurdly unfair blow. Returning home from her second job cleaning offices, she found the building superintendent waiting with a final eviction warning. The man was unsympathetic, citing policy while ignoring her soft, pleading voice. "Please, sir, I have a little boy. We have nowhere else to go." Her words came out timid and polite, but inside horror and anxiety surged until she felt dizzy and numb. Her balance nearly lost as despair threatened to overwhelm her. She spent the night packing what little they owned into plastic bags, tears streaming silently down her face while Tommy slept fitfully on the couch. The cold wind whistled through the apartment, chilling her malnourished body to the bone. Sleep-deprived and broken, Emily sat in the darkness, her inner world violently torn apart by the unfairness of it all. She had done everything right, worked endless hours, sacrificed every comfort, yet life stripped her of dignity at every turn. Quiet, emotional stillness settled over her only when she watched Tommy's peaceful face, reminding her why she fought on. Days later, Vinny could no longer stay away. He returned to the south side under the guise of checking another property, but his true purpose was to find Emily. He spotted her leaving the diner after a long shift, her thin frame hunched against the evening chill, moving slowly because of her still painful ankle. Suspicion flickered in her eyes when she noticed the same well-dressed man from the rainy night approaching. She stopped, guarded and fearful, her voice soft and polite. "Sir, it is you again. Is something wrong?" Vinny felt the overwhelming surge of protective love intensify, passionate and burning from the first moment he had seen her vulnerability. It created a compelling focal point in his soul, a fierce need to rescue and shield this destitute woman and her child. Yet violent inner conflict raged within him. Remorse gnawed deeper. How could a man like him, stained by the shadows of his empire, dare to offer protection without tainting her further? The disparity between his immense wealth and her humiliating poverty struck him like a physical blow. He offered her a ride home in his discreet but comfortable vehicle, careful not to overwhelm her with displays of luxury. Emily hesitated, confusion and curiosity mixing with anxiety. I do not want to trouble you, but exhaustion won out, and she accepted with timid gratitude. During the short drive, she spoke little, her voice hesitant, revealing fragments of her life, the endless shifts, the medical bills, the constant fear for Tommy. Vinny listened in silence, his heart tearing with increasing intensity. Each word from her painted a picture of absolute misery that made his own successes feel obscene. Later that night, after ensuring she and Tommy were safely inside, Vinny sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights mocking him from below. The inner turmoil reached a fever pitch. Guilt and remorse consumed him violently. He had tested so many and found them wanting, yet this woman endured unimaginable hardship without bitterness. His passionate attachment grew stronger, no longer just instinct, but a deep emotional calling toward responsibility and compassion, the kind of fatherly protection he had never been able to give his own fractured past. In the following weeks, Vinny began the initial rescue quietly. He arranged for small anonymous acts of help, paying the back rent through a trusted intermediary, so the eviction notice vanished, ensuring the building's heat worked reliably, and having groceries delivered without a name attached. Emily noticed the sudden improvements with shock and deep disorientation. One morning she woke to a warm apartment and a full pantry, her thin body no longer shivering. Dizziness and numbness gave way to confused tears. Who would do this? She whispered to herself, fear and heightened curiosity battling inside her. She remained guarded, suspecting some trap in a world that had taught her kindness came with a price. Yet slowly an overwhelming trust began to form, passionate and intense in its quiet way. Tommy, sensing the change, smiled more often, his innocent presence deepening Vinny's remorse whenever he thought of the boy. Another street confrontation arose unexpectedly one evening as Vinny monitored the neighborhood. Rivals, sensing his growing personal interest in the area, tried to intimidate locals near Emily's building. Voices rose in bold accusations, cars idling threateningly. Vinny intervened calmly but firmly, his powerful presence diffusing the tension without escalation. The rivals retreated, but the suspense left a clear message: his protection now extended here. Driving away, Vinny's emotional conflict intensified violently. The tests he continued on his own world felt increasingly meaningless compared to the genuine kindness he glimpsed in Emily's quiet endurance. Her poverty, thin, malnourished, enduring cold nights and humiliating setbacks stood in heartbreaking contrast to his wealth, which he now viewed with growing discomfort. Later that night, Emily sat with Tommy in their slightly warmer apartment, sharing a simple meal. For the first time in months, a moment of condensed emotional stillness settled over her. She looked at her son and felt a flicker of hope, though confusion and fear still lingered. Unbeknownst to her, the powerful man who had begun to rescue her wrestled with his soul miles away, his gnawing remorse and passionate protective love creating a storm that would soon draw them all closer. The pattern of failure in Vinny's tests had begun to crack, replaced by the first genuine glimpse of kindness that neither wealth nor power could buy, the kindness of a mother fighting for her child, and the emerging compassion of a man learning to heal his own wounded heart through the act of protection. Emily Thompson stood behind the counter of the Southside Diner, her thin arms trembling slightly as she poured coffee for the early regulars. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on her pale, malnourished face. Sleep had once again evaded her the night before, the cold wind creeping through the cracks in her apartment walls and chilling her to the bone. Her cracked shoes pinched her still sore ankle, and the humiliation of her poverty felt heavier than ever. The diner manager had cut her hours again without explanation, citing slow business, leaving her even more desperate and powerless. Tommy had gone to school with only a small apple in his lunch, the boy trying to hide his disappointment with a brave smile that broke her heart. Emily's voice remained soft and timid when she spoke to customers, polite even when they snapped at her for slow service. Inside, however, her inner world churned with violent intensity, fear, anxiety, and a deep, numbing despair that made her question how much longer she could endure. Later that afternoon, the bell above the diner door jingled, and Vincent Moretti stepped inside. The powerful mafia boss wore a simple dark coat that still carried the quiet air of authority and wealth. His fair-skinned face was composed, but his sharp blue eyes scanned the room with careful intensity. He had come under the pretense of checking one of his construction sites nearby, but the truth burned hotter in his chest. The overwhelming protective attachment he felt toward Emily had only grown since their last encounter, passionate and fierce from the very first moment he had seen her vulnerability on that rain-soaked street. It created a compelling focal point in his soul, clashing violently with the gnawing remorse that now tormented him day and night. How could a man like him, wealthy beyond measure, commanding respect and fear in equal measure, allow such a destitute woman and her child to suffer in the shadows of his city? Emily noticed him immediately. Suspicion flickered across her hazel eyes, quickly followed by guarded fear and heightened curiosity. Her voice came out soft and polite as she approached his table with the coffee pot. "Good afternoon, sir." "Black coffee as usual." Vinny nodded, his gaze steady but gentle. "Thank you, Emily." The use of her name startled her, sending a wave of confusion and disorientation through her. She nearly lost her balance, steadying herself on the edge of the table as dizziness washed over her from exhaustion and shock. Why did this powerful stranger keep returning? What did he want from someone as powerless as her? They began talking in quiet moments between her tasks. Vinny asked gentle questions about her day, listening with genuine attention that felt foreign in her world of indifference. Emily answered hesitantly at first, her timid voice revealing fragments of her struggles, the endless shifts, the piling bills, the constant worry for Tommy. Each word she spoke intensified Vinny's inner turmoil. His remorse grew sharper, a violent tearing in his heart, as he contrasted his own life of luxury private drivers, luxurious penthouses warmed against the harshest Chicago winter's tables, filled with abundance, with her humiliating poverty. She was thin, sleep-deprived, enduring night after night of cold wind that left her shivering and weak. The disparity tore at him with increasing intensity, fueling a passionate, burning desire to protect and provide for her and the boy. Weeks later, their conversations had become a small ritual. Vinny would sit in the corner booth for hours, ordering simple meals and leaving generous but discreet tips that Emily accepted with wide-eyed confusion. One evening after her shift, he offered to walk her part of the way home. Emily hesitated, fear and anxiety rising, but curiosity and the growing trust she could not deny won out. I do not want to impose, sir," she said softly, her voice polite and timid. As they walked along the dimly lit South Side streets, the wind whipping around them, Emily shared more about Tommy, his love for baseball, his quiet strength despite their hardships. Vinny listened, his heart aching with deep emotional layers of remorse and conflict. The powerful man who could crush rivals with a word felt powerless against the urge to shield this family from further pain. Suddenly, the quiet moment shattered. From a side street, a group of men from a rival faction emerged, their voices loud and confrontational. They had been watching Vinny's movements, sensing his unusual interest in the neighborhood. The rivals blocked the sidewalk, their words bold and threatening as they demanded explanations for his presence and hinted at consequences for interfering in their territory. Tension crackled in the air. Vinny stepped forward calmly, his powerful frame radiating authority without raising his voice. "This street is not yours to claim tonight. Move along." The confrontation stretched for several long, suspense-filled minutes, the rivals testing his resolve with sharp accusations and veiled threats. No violence erupted, but the bold, unexpected clash left Emily frozen in horror and anxiety. She clutched her thin jacket tighter, dizziness and numbness spreading through her as fear for her safety and Tommy's future overwhelmed her. Vinny diffused the situation with measured words and sheer presence, the rivals eventually retreating into the shadows with frustrated glares. As they walked on, Emily's voice trembled. "Who are you really? Why are you helping someone like me?" Vinny felt the inner tearing reach a new peak. His gnawing remorse and violent emotional conflict raged inside him, the wealthy, powerful man, tormented by the knowledge that his world might bring danger closer to her rather than protection. Yet the passionate attachment burned even stronger, a deep protective love that made him want to rescue her completely. Later that night, in the quiet of her apartment, Emily sat with Tommy, the boy curled up under a thin blanket. A rare moment of condensed emotional stillness settled over her as she stroked his hair. Tommy looked up with innocent eyes. "That man, he seems nice, Mom." Emily smiled faintly, but inside confusion and fear battled with the overwhelming trust that was beginning to take root. The absurdity of her life struck her again, an unjust world that left her powerless and humiliated, yet suddenly offered glimpses of safety from a stranger whose wealth and power felt both terrifying and comforting. Days later, another unreasonable blow fell. The diner manager fired her without warning, citing fabricated complaints from customers. Emily stood there, thin and trembling, her voice soft and polite even as tears threatened. Please, sir, I need this job for my son. The manager shrugged, unmoved. She walked home in a dazed numbness and pain, mixing with deep disorientation. How could life be so cruel? She had sacrificed everything, yet every door seemed to slam shut. That evening, hunger gnawed at her stomach as she gave the last bit of food to Tommy, her own body, weakening from malnutrition and sleep deprivation. The cold wind howled outside, mirroring the violent tearing in her heart, despair so intense it left her curled on the floor in silent sobs once Tommy slept. Vinny learned of the firing through his quiet network. His remorse exploded into a storm of inner conflict. Sitting in his luxurious penthouse surrounded by symbols of success that now felt empty and grotesque, he paced the room. The disparity between his wealth and Emily's utter misery struck him with brutal force. He had tested so many and found betrayal or greed, but Emily's quiet endurance revealed something pure and real. His passionate burning attachment to her and Tommy intensified, creating a focal point of emotional upheaval that left him breathless with the weight of responsibility. The following week, Vinny arranged for Emily to be rehired at the diner with better conditions again through discreet channels. When she returned to work and found her hours restored, and even a small raise, shock and confusion overwhelmed her. She nearly fainted from the dizzying mix of relief and fear. Who was doing this? Why her? Her guarded suspicion began to melt into an overwhelming surge of trust and attachment, passionate and intense, born from the first moment of his protection. She felt like someone who had been drowning suddenly finding solid ground offered by a powerful hand. One quiet afternoon in the diner, during a slow moment, Emily approached Vinny's booth with fresh coffee. Her voice was soft and timid, but her hazel eyes held a new depth of curiosity and vulnerability. Sir, Mr. Moretti, I do not understand why you keep coming back. Someone like you with so much, and someone like me with nothing. It scares me. But it also gives me hope for Tommy. Vinny looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the violent inner storm. The remorse and guilt tore at him more fiercely than ever, the powerful mafia boss haunted by the fear that his protection might one day bring her harm, yet unable to walk away from the deep fatherly compulsion to shield her and the boy. Then came the shocking revelation. As they spoke, Emily's voice dropped even lower, trembling with the weight of a secret she had carried for years. She glanced around to ensure no one could hear her thin hands twisting nervously in her apron. There is something I need to tell you. Something I have never told anyone. Tommy. He is your son. From that one night years ago, before everything fell apart in my life, I was too afraid to reach out. I thought your world would only bring danger to him. But seeing you now, the way you have helped us without asking for anything, I cannot keep hiding it anymore. The words hit Vinny like a silent explosion. Shock and extreme psychological turmoil ripped through him, his powerful frame momentarily frozen. The revelation shattered his carefully constructed emotional walls. Tommy, his biological son, the boy he had felt an instinctive pull toward, was flesh of his flesh. Violent inner conflict erupted within his heart. Overwhelming joy and protective love clashed with consuming remorse and guilt. For all the years he had unknowingly left them in such desperate poverty. How could he have failed to know the disparity between his immense wealth and the humiliating conditions in which his own child had suffered, tore at him with unbearable intensity. Remorse gnawed so deeply it felt like it would consume him whole. His passionate attachment to Emily and Tommy now burned with even greater force, transformed into a profound fatherly responsibility that left no room for doubt. Emily watched his reaction with fear and anxiety, her own heart pounding in confusion and disorientation. She felt dizzy numbness spreading as she waited for his response. The weight of her long-held secret finally lifted, yet leaving her vulnerable and terrified of rejection. Vinny reached out slowly, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Emily, I had no idea. None. But I swear to you I will protect you both. No more tests. No more wondering if kindness is real. You and Tommy, you are not alone anymore. In the quiet that followed, a moment of condensed emotional stillness enveloped them both. Emily's suspicion had fully given way to overwhelming trust and attachment. Vinny's inner world, once dominated by cynicism and isolation, now raged with a new, deeper turmoil, remorse for the past, fierce determination for the future, and a burning commitment to rescue and raise his son. The first major twist had changed everything, setting the stage for even greater tests of the heart in the shadows of Chicago. Next morning, Emily Thompson woke in her still chilly apartment, the revelation from the previous day echoing in her mind like a distant thunder. Her thin body ached from another restless night, the cold wind having slipped through the cracks once more, leaving her shivering and malnourished frame even weaker. Tommy stirred beside her on the shared mattress, his small hand clutching the faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap, as if it were a shield against the world. The shocking truth she had finally spoken aloud, that Tommy was Vinnie Moretti's biological son, left her in a state of deep disorientation. Dizziness washed over her as she stood, numbness spreading through her limbs from exhaustion and the overwhelming mix of fear and fragile hope. She had gone from desperate poverty and powerlessness to the terrifying reality of being noticed, protected, and suddenly connected to a man whose wealth and power dwarfed her entire existence. Her voice remained soft and timid when she spoke to Tommy, "Sweetheart, everything is going to be different now, I think." But inside, her heart tore with violent intensity, confusion, anxiety, and a passionate surge of trust that burned from the very first moment Vinnie had shown her kindness. Later that morning, Vinnie sat in his downtown penthouse, the luxurious space filled with morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The powerful mafia boss stared at the city skyline, his fair-skinned face etched with lines of gnawing remorse that had grown sharper since Emily's revelation. The knowledge that Tommy, his own flesh and blood, had suffered in such humiliating poverty while he lived in abundance, created a violent emotional conflict within him. Remorse consumed him like fire. How had he failed to sense the truth earlier? The disparity between his immense wealth and Emily's absolute misery struck him with brutal force while he commanded construction empires and moved through secure, warm spaces. She had endured cold nights, skipped meals, and powerless desperation. His passionate, protective attachment to both Emily and the boy intensified into a deep, fatherly love that clashed violently with the hardened walls he had built after years of betrayal and tests. The inner tearing grew increasingly intense, leaving him pacing the elegant rooms in quiet torment. In the weeks that followed, Vinnie began building the connection through humility, deliberately setting aside displays of his wealth. He suggested simple outings, park benches with gas station coffee, quiet walks along the Lake Michigan shoreline where the wind carried the scent of water and distant city life. Emily accepted with guarded curiosity mixed with fear, her voice soft and polite whenever she addressed him. "Mr. Moretti, Vinnie, I do not know how to thank you for everything, but I am still afraid. What if this is too good to be true?" Her thin frame, still showing the marks of long-term malnutrition and sleep deprivation, moved carefully beside him. Each small gesture from Vinnie, paying for the cheap coffee without fanfare, listening without interruption, deepened her overwhelming trust and attachment. Yet absurdly unfair events continued to test her. One afternoon, after a long shift, the landlord appeared again with yet another unreasonable complaint about noise, threatening to raise the rent despite the recent anonymous help. Emily stood there powerless and humiliated, her voice trembling politely as she pleaded. The encounter left her dizzy and numb, with shock tears stinging her eyes as she returned to the apartment where Tommy waited with worried eyes. Tommy's presence soon became central to their growing bond. One sunny afternoon in the park, Emily brought the boy along. Tommy, wearing his beloved Cubs cap, eyed Vinnie with a mix of shyness and curiosity. "Are you really my dad?" the boy asked quietly during a moment of condensed emotional stillness on a park bench. Vinnie felt his heart crack open wider, the remorse and guilt surging violently. He knelt to the boy's level, his powerful voice gentle. "Yes, Tommy, I am, and I am going to make sure you never have to worry again." The father-child bond began to form in these humble moments, throwing a worn baseball back and forth with a second-hand glove. Vinnie had quietly provided, listening to Tommy talk about school and his dreams of one day playing in a real stadium. Emily watched from the side, her hazel eyes filled with a passionate mix of fear and hope. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, now suddenly protected by a wealthy, powerful man, left her in extreme psychological shock, at times dizziness and disorientation when she thought of the vast gap between their worlds. Lily, Emily's 8-year-old daughter, joined them soon after. The little girl, with the same fair skin and tired eyes as her mother, was quiet and observant. She carried a small handmade doll stitched from old clothes, a pitiful reminder of their poverty. Vinnie's wealth was displayed with increasing intensity in his mind. Alone, he could have bought her a room full of toys, yet he chose humility, sitting on the grass and listening to Lily's soft stories about her favorite books from the library. The children's innocent presence deepened the emotional cracks in Vinnie's armor. His inner turmoil raged. The powerful man who tested everyone for loyalty now felt the weight of genuine responsibility, remorse tearing at him for all the lost years. Jamal, Tommy's 9-year-old loyal best friend from a similarly broken home in the neighborhood, entered the picture during one of their simple outings. The boy was street smart and guarded, his clothes worn and his eyes wary. Jamal immediately distrusted the powerful stranger. "Tommy, guys like him don't stick around for kids like us," he warned in a low voice during a quiet moment by the lake. They bring trouble and then disappear. His words created tension, making Emily fearful and anxious as she overheard. Vinny felt the sting, his gnawing remorse intensifying into violent inner conflict. He wanted to prove himself, yet knew his world of shadows could bring danger. Tense street confrontations continued to heighten the suspense. One evening, as Vinny walked the group back toward the south side after a humble gathering in the park, a rival faction appeared unexpectedly from a side alley. Their voices rose in bold accusations blocking the path, and demanding to know why Vinny was spending so much time in their territory. The rivals' words were sharp and threatening, testing his boundaries without crossing into violence. Vinny stepped forward with calm authority, his powerful presence diffusing the situation after several suspense-filled minutes. "This is not about territory tonight. This is about family." The rivals eventually retreated, but the encounter left Emily shaken with horror and anxiety, her thin body trembling as dizziness and numbness overtook her. She nearly lost her balance, Vinny steadying her gently. The unfairness of it all, her life of constant struggle suddenly shadowed by the very protection meant to save her, tore violently at her inner world. Later that night, back in the modest apartment, another absurdly unjust event struck. A notice arrived stating the building was being sold, and all tenants had 30 days to vacate despite recent repairs. Emily sat on the floor, surrounded by their few belongings, her malnourished frame hunched in defeat. Tears fell silently as she held Tommy and Lily close. The cold wind whistled outside, mirroring the storm inside her. She felt powerless, humiliated, and deeply tormented, someone who had endured so much, now facing yet another cruel blow. In that moment of condensed emotional stillness, she whispered to the children, her voice soft and breaking, "We will find a way." But the violent tearing in her heart left her numb with despair. Vinny, learning of the new threat through his network, felt his remorse explode into even greater intensity. In his luxurious penthouse, surrounded by warmth and abundance, that now felt like a painful contrast, he grappled with violent emotional conflict. The passionate burning attachment to Emily and the children, especially his son Tommy, drove him to arrange discreet solutions once more, ensuring the family's immediate safety without revealing the full extent of his power. Yet the tests he once relied on felt meaningless now. His inner world was cracking further, the fatherly love and responsibility clashing with the guilt of his past life. Weeks later, during a simple street fair outing with funnel cake and lemonade for the children, the connection deepened. Jamal's distrust began to show small fractures as he watched Vinny patiently help Lily with a game at one of the booths. Emily's overwhelming trust continued to grow passionate and intense, transforming her fear into a quiet attachment that made her feel seen for the first time. Yet the disparity remained stark. While Vinny could have ended their struggles with a single decision, he chose humility, sitting with them on the grass in simple clothes, sharing stories that revealed his own hidden pain. In these humble moments, the emotional cracks widened. Vinny's remorse and inner torment reached new depths as he witnessed the children's innocent joy amid their previous misery. Emily experienced moments of extreme psychological shock, dizziness, and disorientation when she allowed herself to imagine a safer future. The father-child bond between Vinny and Tommy grew stronger with every shared laugh and quiet conversation, the boy's presence acting as a healing force that began to soothe the powerful man's wounded heart. The connection built through humility was fragile, but real, setting the stage for greater trials. Vinny's passionate protective love burned brighter even as his inner conflict raged violently. Emily's trust deepened, though fear and the memory of her humiliating poverty lingered. And in the quiet, emotional stillness between tense confrontations and unjust hardships, the seeds of compassion, responsibility, and healing took root in the shadows of Chicago. The soft light of dawn filtered into the modest South Side apartment, touching the worn blankets where Emily Thompson lay awake. Her thin, malnourished body still carried the exhaustion of another sleepless night, the cold wind from the previous evening having found its way through the cracks once more. The revelation about Tommy and the growing connection with Vincent Moretti had brought fragile hope, yet it also amplified her inner turmoil. She felt a passionate, burning attachment to the man who had begun to protect them, but fear and confusion lingered like shadows. Emily's voice remained soft and timid when she woke Tommy and Lily. "Come on, sweethearts. Let us get ready for the day." Inside, her heart tore with increasing intensity, the mindset of someone who had endured absolute poverty now suddenly finding herself and her children shielded by a powerful, wealthy man, left her in waves of dizzying disorientation and numb gratitude. Later that morning, Vincent Moretti stood in his luxurious downtown penthouse, the city skyline stretching endlessly beyond the windows. The powerful mafia boss gripped the edge of his mahogany desk, his fair-skinned face tight with gnawing remorse that had deepened into a violent storm. The humble outings with Emily and the children had cracked his emotional armor further. Tommy, his biological son, laughing while tossing a baseball, Lily's quiet smiles, and even Jamal's wary glances, all reminded him of the years his own flesh and blood had suffered in humiliating conditions while he lived in abundance. His inner conflict raged with ferocious intensity. The wealthy man who commanded respect and moved mountains of concrete and steel now felt consumed by guilt for the cold nights Emily had endured. The skipped meals, the powerless desperation. His passionate protective love for Emily and the children burned hotter, creating a compelling focal point that clashed violently with the remorse tearing at his soul. How could he offer them safety when his world carried hidden dangers? In the weeks that followed, the bond deepened through simple family moments. They gathered for free outdoor concerts in Grant Park, sitting on the grass with inexpensive snacks. Emily's thin frame, still showing the marks of long-term malnutrition and sleep deprivation, relaxed slightly as she watched Tommy and Lily enjoy the music. Her voice was polite and gentle when she spoke to Vinny. "This is nice. Thank you for bringing us here." Yet even in these peaceful moments, absurdly unfair events continued to strike. One afternoon after returning home, Emily found another eviction threat slipped under the door, this time citing vague building code violations that seemed designed to harass the poorest tenants. She sank to the floor, dizziness and numbness overwhelming her, as horror and anxiety surged. The humiliation of her poverty felt unbearable. Thin, powerless, and exhausted, she had worked endless hours only to face yet another cruel blow. Quiet emotional stillness settled over her only when Tommy and Lily climbed into her lap, their innocent presence, a small anchor amid the storm tearing violently at her heart. Vinny learned of the new threat through his discreet channels. The news intensified his inner torment to a breaking point. Later that night, alone in his penthouse, he paced the elegant rooms, the contrast between his wealth and Emily's misery striking him with brutal force. His remorse gnawed deeper than ever. The powerful man who could resolve problems with a single call felt bound by the need to maintain humility and avoid overwhelming her with the full extent of his power. The father-child bond with Tommy grew stronger in these moments of internal struggle. During one park visit, Tommy had quietly helped Vinny fix a loose button on his coat, the boy's small hands working with care. "You don't have to do everything alone, you know," Tommy had said innocently. Those words pierced Vinny like a blade, triggering extreme psychological shock and violent emotional conflict. The boy he had unknowingly left in poverty was now healing him, reminding the hardened mafia boss of the compassion he had long buried. Jamal's presence added layers of tension. The 9-year-old remained guarded his initial distrust, creating small conflicts during their gatherings. "Why does he keep coming around?" Jamal muttered to Tommy one evening at a street fair, his voice low with suspicion. "Powerful men like him always want something." Emily overheard and felt a fresh wave of fear and anxiety, her balance nearly lost as disorientation washed over her. Vinny's heart twisted with remorse. He wanted to prove his sincerity, yet understood the boy's wariness all too well from his own shadowed life. The contrast between his immense wealth and the children's lived experience of poverty made his protective attachment burn with even greater passion and intensity. Another tense street confrontation arose unexpectedly weeks later. As the group walked back from a simple gathering near the lake, a rival faction appeared from a side street, their vehicles slowing to block the path. The rivals' voices rose in bold, heated accusations, questioning Vinny's growing involvement in the neighborhood and issuing veiled warnings about staying out of their affairs. The suspense stretched taut as Vinny stepped forward with calm authority, his powerful presence commanding the moment without escalation. "This is not the time or place for this discussion. These streets belong to the people who live here." After several long-charged minutes, the rivals retreated, but the encounter left Emily shaken with horror, her thin body trembling as numbness and pain radiated through her from the anxiety. She leaned on Vinny for support, her voice soft and breaking. "I am scared. For the children." Vinny's inner world fractured further, the remorse and guilt violently tearing at him as he realized his protection might also draw danger closer. In the quiet aftermath, moments of condensed emotional stillness offered brief relief. One evening in the apartment, now slightly warmer thanks to Vinny's discreet help, Emily watched as Vinny sat on the floor with the children. Tommy proudly showed him a drawing of a baseball field. Lily shared a handmade card with a simple American flag, and even Jamal hesitantly joined in a game of catch with an old glove. Emily's overwhelming trust continued to deepen, passionate and intense, transforming her previous desperation into a quiet attachment. Yet the mindset of someone lifted from extreme poverty by a wealthy, powerful man still triggered waves of psychological shock dizziness when she allowed herself to imagine a future without constant struggle numbness, when she remembered the cold, humiliating nights she had endured. Vinny's healing began in these family moments, though his internal conflict raged on. The children, especially Tommy, acted as gentle healers. During one quiet afternoon when Vinny felt the weight of his past decisions particularly heavy, Tommy placed a small hand on his arm. "You look sad sometimes, but you make us feel safe." "That's what dads do, right?" The innocent words delivered a profound message of compassion, cracking Vinny's heart open wider. Remorse and love clashed violently within him. The powerful mafia boss, who had tested loyalty in others for so long, now found himself tested by the pure kindness of a child he had unknowingly abandoned to hardship. His wealth felt increasingly grotesque against the backdrop of Emily's lingering poverty. While he returned each night to luxury, she still fought sleep deprivation and the physical toll of years of struggle. Unreasonable and unjust situations continued to expose Emily's misery. 1 week later, the diner reduced her hours again without warning, citing budget cuts that seemed selectively applied to the most vulnerable workers. Emily stood there, voice soft and polite as she pleaded for fairness, only to be dismissed. She walked home in a daze, tears streaming down her face, the cold wind cutting through her thin jacket. The violent tearing in her inner world left her curled in quiet sobs once the children slept, feeling powerless and humiliated. Vinny, upon learning of it, felt his remorse surge into a consuming storm. The disparity between his ability to provide and her continued suffering created extreme emotional upheaval. Through it all, the deepening bond brought glimmers of healing. In humble family moments, sharing stories, playing simple games, and sitting together in quiet stillness, the father-child relationship between Vinny and Tommy grew stronger, the boy's innocent kindness slowly soothing the powerful man's wounded heart. Emily's attachment burned with passionate intensity, her trust now a steady flame despite lingering fear. Jamal's distrust began to show tiny fractures as he witnessed Vinny's genuine care, yet the internal conflict in Vinny's heart reached new depths of intensity. Sitting alone later that night in his penthouse, surrounded by symbols of success that felt hollow, he grappled with violent remorse and the burning need to protect his family. The stage was set for even greater trials, where the lines between his two worlds would blur and the healing power of compassion would be tested, like never before in the shadows of Chicago. Next morning, Emily Thompson moved slowly through the modest apartment, her thin, malnourished frame still heavy with exhaustion from yet another night interrupted by the cold wind seeping through the walls. The deepening bond with Vincent Moretti and the children's growing attachment had brought moments of fragile warmth, but the reality of her poverty remained crushing. She prepared a simple breakfast for Tommy and Lily, her voice soft and timid as she encouraged them. "Eat well, my loves. Today will be better." Inside, however, her heart tore with increasing violence. The overwhelming trust and passionate attachment she felt toward Vinny clashed with lingering fear and confusion. The mindset of a woman once desperately poor, now suddenly protected by a powerful, wealthy man, left her in waves of dizzying, disorientation, and numb gratitude mixed with anxiety. Later that afternoon, Vincent Moretti sat in his downtown office, the luxurious space, a stark contrast to the struggles he now carried in his heart. The powerful mafia boss stared at reports on his construction projects, but his mind was elsewhere. The father-child moments with Tommy, the innocent healing offered by the children, and the deepening connection with Emily had intensified his gnawing remorse to unbearable levels. His inner turmoil raged like a storm, remorse for the years his own son had suffered in humiliating poverty, while he lived in abundance, violent emotional conflict over how his shadowed world might one day endanger the very family he longed to protect. His passionate, protective love burned with fierce intensity, creating a compelling focal point that left him restless and tormented. Weeks later, while Vinny was away handling urgent business matters on the far side of the city, the shocking betrayal unfolded. A rival underboss, sensing Vinny's unusual distraction and personal involvement in the South Side neighborhood, decided to strike where it would hurt most. The rival had discovered whispers about Tommy, the hidden son, and saw the boy as the perfect leverage to weaken Vinny's position and seize control of key territory and construction contracts. That evening, as Tommy walked home from a neighborhood park with Jamal, a group of men from the rival faction appeared unexpectedly from a side street. They did not use violence against the children, but their bold, threatening words and the way they blocked the path created pure terror. "Tell your mother the powerful man can't protect you forever," one snarled before they grabbed Tommy and forced him into a waiting car, speeding away into the shadows. Jamal ran home in panic, his voice breaking as he told Emily what had happened. The news hit Emily like a physical blow. She collapsed to her knees in the apartment, horror and overwhelming anxiety surging through her until dizziness and numbness made the room spin. Her thin body trembled violently, loss of balance sending her curling on the floor in shock and confusion. "Tommy, My baby." Her voice came out in soft, broken whispers, polite even in her despair as she tried to comfort Lily, who was crying beside her. The humiliating poverty that had defined her life now felt even more cruel. An unjust world that had already stripped her of so much now threatening to take her son. The inner tearing in her heart escalated into violent, numbing agony. She felt powerless, desperate, and utterly broken. The passionate trust she had placed in Vinny, now mixed with deep fear that his world had brought this crisis upon them. Vinny received the call while in a tense meeting. The words sent a shockwave through him, extreme psychological turmoil ripping through his powerful frame. He stood abruptly. His fair-skinned face, draining of color as remorse and guilt, exploded into a consuming storm. His own son, his flesh and blood, kidnapped because of him. The violent inner conflict tore at him with ferocious intensity. The wealthy, powerful man who had tested loyalty in others now faced the ultimate test of his own failures. How could his life of shadows have endangered the child he had only just begun to know and love? His passionate, protective attachment to Emily and the children burned into a fierce, fatherly determination that overrode everything else. He left the meeting without explanation, his mind racing with a single focus: rescue Tommy at any cost. The life-or-death crisis unfolded in a heart-pounding sequence later that night. Vinny mobilized his most trusted men and tracked the rivals' location to an old warehouse on the industrial edge of the south side. Tension crackled in the air as they approached under cover of darkness. A bold, unexpected confrontation erupted when the rivals realized they were being challenged. Voices rose in heated accusations and demands across the dimly lit space. The rivals using Tommy as a shield while issuing threats about territory and power. "You think you can have it all, Moretti. The Empire and a secret family. Hand over control or the boy pays." The suspense stretched unbearably as Vinny stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with raw emotion. No excessive violence broke out, but the bold clash of wills and the sight of his terrified son created a scene of intense drama and emotional stakes. In the charged moment, Vinny moved with calculated resolve to reach Tommy. As the rivals shifted and the situation grew more precarious, a sudden scuffle sent a heavy crate toppling. Vinny threw himself forward, shielding Tommy with his own body. The crate struck him hard across the back and side, causing a deep critical injury that sent pain exploding through him. Blood stained his clothes as he collapsed, but he kept Tommy safe in his arms. The boy, tears streaming down his face, pressed the faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap against the wound with trembling hands. In that raw life-or-death instant, Tommy whispered through his sobs, his innocent voice cutting straight to Vinny's heart. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Dad. Mom says real strength is letting people help. You." Those words delivered a profound message of healing and vulnerability. Vinny, lying wounded on the cold warehouse floor, felt his inner world shatter completely. Extreme psychological shock and violent emotional conflict raged within him. The powerful mafia boss who had built his life on strength and control was now being comforted by his own 10-year-old son. Remorse tore at him with unbearable intensity for all the lost time, the years of poverty Tommy had endured, and the danger his world had brought. His passionate, protective love for the family burned brighter than ever, mixed with a deep, fatherly gratitude that left him breathless amid the pain. The rescue succeeded as his men gained the upper hand through sheer presence and negotiation, the rivals retreating with frustrated curses, but the crisis had exacted a heavy toll. Emily arrived at the hidden safe location hours later, guided by Vinny's trusted associate. She rushed to Vinny's side, her thin, sleep-deprived body trembling with horror and anxiety. Seeing the powerful man wounded and her son safe but shaken sent waves of shock and confusion through her. Dizziness and numbness nearly caused her to lose balance as she dropped to her knees beside them. "Vinny. Tommy." Her voice was soft, timid, and breaking, with polite concern even in her terror. She held Tommy close, then turned to Vinny, her hazel eyes filled with tears. The disparity between his immense wealth and the vulnerability he now showed in protecting them struck her with new force, deepening her overwhelming trust and attachment into something even more passionate and intense. In the quiet hours that followed, a moment of condensed emotional stillness settled over the room as Emily and the children tended to Vinny with simple supplies, clean cloths, blankets, and careful hands. Tommy stayed close to his father, the boy's innocent kindness acting as a balm. Lily and Jamal watched with wide eyes, Jamal's distrust fracturing further as he witnessed the sacrifice. Vinny, fighting pain and blood loss, looked at Emily and the children, with eyes full of remorse and love. The inner tearing in his heart reached its peak intensity. The wealthy, powerful man who had once tested everyone now felt the full weight of responsibility and the healing power of the family he had unknowingly neglected for so long. The shocking betrayal and life-or-death crisis had changed everything. Vinny's wounds were physical, but the deeper injury to his soul from years of distance and the new danger his world had invited created a violent storm of guilt and determination. Emily's inner world was equally torn, gratitude for the rescue mixed with fear of what his life truly meant for their future. The father-child bond between Vinny and Tommy had been forged in fire, the little boy's words echoing as a message of compassion that began to heal the powerful man's deepest emotional wounds. Yet the crisis was far from over, and greater tests of trust, protection, and redemption awaited them all in the shadows of Chicago. Next morning, pale sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains of the hidden safe house on the outskirts of Chicago. Emily Thompson moved carefully around the makeshift bedroom, her thin, malnourished body still trembling from the terror of the previous night. The shocking kidnapping and the life-or-death rescue had left her in a state of deep disorientation. She had barely slept, the cold wind outside reminding her of too many freezing nights in their old apartment. Her voice remained soft and timid as she spoke to Lily and Jamal, who huddled nearby. "Stay close, my dears. Everything will be all right." Inside, however, her heart tore with violent intensity. The overwhelming trust and passionate attachment she felt toward Vinny now mixed with fresh waves of horror and anxiety. She was still the same destitute woman who had endured humiliating poverty, yet she was now being protected by a powerful man who had risked everything for her son, his son. The mindset of someone lifted so suddenly from powerlessness left her dizzy and numb, her balance unsteady as she tended to the wounded mafia boss. Vincent Moretti lay on the bed, his powerful frame weakened by the deep injury from the falling crate. Pain radiated through his side with every breath, but it was nothing compared to the gnawing remorse that consumed him. The fair-skinned American man who commanded vast construction empires and moved through the city with unchallenged authority now felt utterly vulnerable. The knowledge that his world had brought danger to Tommy, his own biological son, created a violent emotional conflict that tore at his soul with increasing ferocity. Remorse gnawed deeper than the physical wound years of hidden wealth, while Emily and the children suffered in cold, wind-filled nights, skipped meals, and absolute misery. His passionate, protective love for Emily and the children burned like fire, creating a compelling focal point amid the storm. Yet the inner tearing grew unbearable. How could a man of his power fail so completely to shield his own family? In the hours that followed the rescue, the children became the unexpected healers. Tommy, still shaken but determined, stayed close to his father's side. The 10-year-old boy carefully pressed clean cloths against Vinny's wound, his small hands steady despite the fear in his eyes. "You saved me, Dad," Tommy whispered during a quiet moment of condensed emotional stillness. "Now let me help you." Those innocent words struck Vinny with extreme psychological shock. The powerful mafia boss, who had built his life on strength and control, was being comforted and cared for by the very child he had unknowingly left in poverty. Violent inner conflict raged within him. Remorse for the past clashed with a deep fatherly gratitude that began to soothe his emotional wounds. The disparity between his immense wealth and the simple, heartfelt care from his malnourished son left him breathless with guilt and love. Emily watched the scene with tears in her hazel eyes. Her thin frame, marked by years of sleep deprivation and hunger, moved with gentle care as she brought warm blankets and simple soup made from supplies in the safe house. Her voice was soft and polite when she spoke to Vinny. "Please rest, Vinny. You do not have to carry everything alone." The words echoed Tommy's, amplifying the healing. Yet absurdly unfair events continued to test her resilience. Later that afternoon, news arrived through Vinny's trusted men that the rival faction had not given up. They were spreading rumors in the South Side, threatening anyone connected to Emily's old apartment building. The thought of her former neighbors suffering because of her connection to Vinny sent fresh horror and anxiety surging through Emily. She felt dizzy and numb, nearly losing her balance, as the violent tearing in her heart escalated. The humiliating poverty she had endured for so long now seemed to follow her even into safety, exposing her utter misery and powerlessness once again. Weeks later, as Vinny's physical condition slowly stabilized in the hidden location, the dramatic healing continued through the children's innocent kindness. Lily, the 8-year-old girl with her mother's tired eyes, sat beside Vinny and read aloud from a worn library book she had brought. Her small voice filled the room with simple stories of courage and family, offering a moment of condensed emotional stillness that eased the powerful man's pain. Jamal, Tommy's loyal best friend, remained more guarded at first, but the crisis had begun to crack his distrust. He helped fetch water and kept watch at the window, muttering, "I thought guys like him only brought trouble, but he really did save Tommy." Witnessing Jamal's slow shift added another layer to Vinny's inner turmoil. The remorse for how his world affected vulnerable children like Jamal tore at him violently. The rising stakes intensified when another bold, unexpected street confrontation erupted. Vinny, still recovering but determined to protect his family, insisted on a discreet meeting with his most loyal associates near the safe house perimeter. As the discussion unfolded in a quiet, industrial lot, rival faction members appeared suddenly from surrounding buildings. Their voices rose in tense, heated accusations, demanding Vinny step back from the south side or face further consequences. The rivals blocked escape routes with their vehicles, creating thick suspense without crossing into excessive violence. Vinny, despite his injury, stood with calm authority, his powerful presence holding the line. "This ends here. My family is not part of your games." The confrontation stretched for long, charged minutes before the rivals retreated, but the encounter left everyone shaken. Emily, waiting inside with the children, felt horror surge through her upon hearing the news. Dizziness and numbness overwhelmed her once more. The unfairness of it all, violently tearing at her inner world. She had finally found protection, yet danger still circled like wolves. In the quiet aftermath, Emily sat beside Vinny's bed during a moment of condensed emotional stillness. Her voice trembled softly. "I was so scared for you. For all of us. I do not know how to repay what you have done." Vinny looked at her, his blue eyes filled with deep layers of torment. The passionate attachment he felt toward Emily and the children had become a burning force, yet it clashed violently with his gnawing remorse. The contrast between his luxurious, life-warm penthouses, endless resources, security, and Emily's lingering signs of poverty, her thin frame, the exhaustion etched on her face, struck him with brutal force. He had risked everything to rescue Tommy, but the crisis had exposed how his power could also endanger them. The inner tearing reached new heights of intensity, leaving the wealthy mafia boss in profound emotional upheaval. Tommy continued to heal his father in small but profound ways. One evening, the boy brought Vinny the old pocket watch that had once belonged to Emily's grandfather, a simple American heirloom that had survived their hardships. "This helps me feel strong when things are scary," Tommy said quietly. "Maybe it can help you too, Dad." The innocent gesture delivered another powerful message of compassion and resilience. Vinny held the watch tightly. Extreme psychological shock, mixing with overwhelming fatherly love. The child he had failed to know for 10 years was now mending the deepest wounds in his heart, the emotional scars of isolation, betrayal, and the hollowness of power without purpose. Remorse and gratitude clashed violently inside him, the healing both tender and painful. Lily and Jamal added their own quiet contributions. Lily drew pictures of their growing family and placed them near Vinny's bed, while Jamal shared stories of his own difficult life in the neighborhood, slowly opening up and revealing deeper truths about the struggles of disadvantaged children. These family moments created pockets of condensed emotional stillness amid the rising tension, allowing the children's kindness to slowly soothe Vinny's tormented soul. Yet the drama continued to escalate. Another unreasonable and unjust situation struck when word reached them that the old apartment building had been targeted with vandalism and threats, supposedly as a warning to anyone connected to Vinny. Emily learned of it through a frantic call from a former neighbor. The news left her curled in silent tears, her thin body shaking with numbness and pain. The violent intensity of her emotions, fear for the children, gratitude for Vinny's protection, and the humiliating memory of her own powerlessness tore at her inner world like never before. She felt confused and fearful, yet her overwhelming trust in Vinny burned even stronger, passionate, and intense from the very first moment of his care. Vinny's remorse deepened into a consuming storm as he absorbed the news. Lying in the safe house, surrounded by the simple care of the children, he grappled with violent inner conflict. The powerful man who could have ended the threats with a single command chose restraint to keep his family safe from further entanglement in his shadowed world. The disparity between his wealth and Emily's continued emotional suffering made his protective love burn with fiercer determination. Through the long days and nights of recovery, the children's innocent acts of kindness, Tommy's comforting words, Lily's drawings, Jamal's growing trust repeatedly pulled Vinny back from despair. The father-child bond between Vinny and Tommy grew even stronger, the little boy acting as the main healer who delivered messages of vulnerability and strength that began to mend the mafia boss's deepest emotional wounds. Emily's attachment deepened into a quiet, passionate force, her trust now a steady light despite the fear and anxiety that still lingered. The rising stakes had tested them all, but in the dramatic healing unfolding in the hidden safe house, compassion and family were slowly winning against the shadows. Vinny's inner torment remained fierce, yet the children's pure kindness offered a path toward redemption. The road ahead was still uncertain, with greater confrontations and emotional trials waiting in the heart of Chicago. Next morning, soft light crept into the hidden safe house, illuminating the weary faces of those inside. Emily Thompson sat beside Vinnie Moretti's bed, her thin, malnourished frame still showing the deep toll of years of hardship. The dramatic rescue and the children's tender healing had brought fragile moments of hope, Yet the weight of recent events pressed heavily upon her. She had barely slept the cold wind outside, echoing the many freezing nights she had endured in their old apartment. Her voice remained soft and timid as she offered Vinny water. "Please drink this slowly. You need your strength." Inside, however, her heart tore with violent intensity. The overwhelming trust and passionate attachment she felt toward the powerful man who had risked everything for her son now collided with growing fear and confusion. The mindset of a woman once desperately poor, now suddenly protected and drawn into a world of immense wealth and hidden danger, left her in waves of dizziness and deep disorientation. Vinny lay propped against pillows, his powerful body still recovering from the injury, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the storm raging in his soul. The fair-skinned mafia boss who commanded vast construction empires and navigated the city's shadows with authority felt crushed by gnawing remorse. The father-child moments with Tommy, the innocent kindness of Lily and Jamal, and Emily's quiet care had cracked open wounds he had long buried. His passionate, protective love for Emily and the children burned with fierce intensity, creating a compelling focal point that clashed violently with the consuming guilt over his deceptions. He had tested her pretended humility and financial strain even after learning Tommy was his son, all while his true wealth and power loomed in the background. The inner tearing grew increasingly unbearable. How could he have continued the tests when the woman and children he loved had suffered such humiliating poverty? Later that afternoon, the family gathered in the main room of the safe house. Tommy sat close to his father, Lily, leaned against Emily, and Jamal watched with a mix of caution and emerging trust. A moment of condensed emotional stillness settled over them as they shared a simple meal. Emily's voice was gentle and polite. "We are safe here together. That is what matters now." Yet the calm shattered when one of Vinny's trusted men arrived with troubling news. The rival faction had not retreated fully. They were intensifying pressure on the south side, spreading threats that targeted anyone connected to Emily's old life. The report triggered fresh horror in Emily. She felt numbness spread through her limbs, nearly losing her balance as anxiety and fear overwhelmed her. Another absurdly unfair blow had struck her past poverty and powerlessness, now entangled with Vinny's world, exposing her utter misery once more. Vinny felt the climax building inside him. The deception he had maintained, his careful charade of being a man of limited means, even after the shocking revelation about Tommy, could no longer stand. His remorse exploded into a violent storm of inner conflict. The wealthy, powerful man who had tested loyalty in others for years now faced the moment of truth with his own family. The disparity between his immense wealth, luxurious penthouses, endless resources, secure empire, and Emily's continued signs of long-term poverty, her thin frame exhaustion, the memory of cold, wind-filled nights tore at him with brutal force. He could no longer hide behind humility. That evening, as the sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, Vinny asked Emily to walk with him in the secluded yard surrounding the safe house. The air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of the city. Emily followed, her heart pounding with heightened curiosity and underlying fear. Her voice came out soft and timid. "What is it, Vinny? You look troubled." Vinny stopped under the fading light, his blue eyes heavy with torment. The passionate attachment he felt toward her and the children had become a burning force that demanded honesty. "I have not been completely honest with you, Emily," he began, his voice steady, but laced with raw emotion. "Even after you told me Tommy was my son, I continued testing you. I pretended to be a man struggling with money and resources, watching to see if your kindness was real or if you would turn away when things grew difficult. I did this because my past betrayals taught me that people come for what I can give or protect, not for who I am. But you and the children showed me something pure. I was wrong to test you. I was wrong to keep any part of the truth hidden while you shared your deepest struggles." Emily stood frozen, shock and confusion washing over her like a tidal wave. Dizziness and numbness made the ground feel unsteady beneath her feet. Her thin body trembled as the words sank in. The man who had rescued them, who had risked his life for Tommy, had been testing her all along, even after knowing the truth about his son. Horror and anxiety surged violently, tearing at her inner world. She felt the humiliating sting of her poverty again. She had offered her meager tip money, her trust, her vulnerable stories of cold nights and powerless desperation, while he observed from a position of hidden wealth and power. "You were testing me." Her voice cracked soft and polite even in her pain. "After everything, after Tommy, you still did not trust me." The drama escalated rapidly. Emily's overwhelming trust, which had burned passionately from the very first moment of his protection, now fractured under the weight of betrayal. She stepped back, her hazel eyes filling with tears as extreme psychological shock left her numb and disoriented. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, suddenly loved and protected by a wealthy, powerful man turned into violent inner torment. She felt used, exposed, and deeply humiliated. Unreasonable and unjust feelings flooded her. She had sacrificed everything for her children, endured mocking poverty, and now the one person who offered safety had been watching her like a subject in an experiment. The inner tearing became numbing and all-consuming, leaving her breathless. Vinny's own heart shattered in response. His gnawing remorse reached a fever pitch, clashing violently with his deep fatherly love. "Emily, please. Everything else was real. The way I feel about you, about Tommy, Lily, and Jamal, the protection, the care, it was never a lie. But I was scared. My ex-wife betrayed me when she learned the full truth of my life. I built walls and tests to protect myself. I see now how wrong that was, especially with my own son living in such misery while I had everything." His voice broke with the intensity of his emotional upheaval. The powerful mafia boss, reduced to raw vulnerability, felt the disparity between his wealth and her suffering like a knife to the chest. A tense silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant wind. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, her thin frame shaking. Another absurdly unfair wave of emotion crashed over her. She had begun to believe in safety and family, only to have the foundation cracked by deception. Confusion and fear battled with the passionate attachment that still lingered, leaving her in profound disorientation. She turned away, tears falling silently, her inner world violently torn apart. Later that night, the confession's aftermath rippled through the safe house. Tommy sensed the tension and asked quietly, "Did something bad happen?" Mom Emily held her son close, her voice soft and breaking as she tried to shield the children. "We are still a family. We will find our way." But inside, the violent intensity of her emotions left her numb with pain. Vinny sat alone in another room, the weight of his confession crushing him. His remorse was now a consuming fire. The tests he had once relied upon felt like the greatest betrayal of the father-child bond he had only just begun to build with Tommy. The children's healing kindness, especially Tommy's words during the rescue, now stood in heartbreaking contrast to his own actions. In the days that followed, the family remained in the safe house, but a heavy cloud of emotional distance settled over them. Emily remained guarded her trust, shaken though the passionate attachment from the beginning refused to die completely. Vinny's inner conflict raged with even greater violence. The wealthy, powerful man, tormented by guilt, desperate to prove his love was real, yet terrified that his deception had caused irreparable harm. Another tense street confrontation arose when rivals made one final bold attempt to intimidate through distant threats, delivered via a messenger on the perimeter. Vinny handled it with calm authority, but the incident only heightened the stakes and Emily's anxiety. The climax of deception had reached its breaking point. Emily's inner world was a storm of shock, betrayal, and lingering love, while Vinny's soul tore with remorse and determination. The father-child bond with Tommy, the healing presence of Lily and Jamal, and the compassionate core of their connection now hung in delicate balance. In the quiet, emotional stillness that followed the confession, the question remained whether forgiveness and trust could rise from the ashes of deception, or whether the violent tearing would prove too much to overcome in the shadows of Chicago. Next morning, heavy silence hung over the hidden safe house as pale Chicago light filtered through the curtains. Emily Thompson stood by the window, her thin, malnourished frame wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the quiet yard. The confession from the previous evening had shattered the fragile peace they had begun to build. Her hazel eyes were red from sleepless hours, the cold wind of memory still whispering through her mind like the many freezing nights she had endured in their old apartment. She moved with slow, exhausted steps, preparing a simple breakfast for the children. Her voice remained soft and timid when she spoke to Tommy and Lily. "Eat something, my loves. We will get through this." Inside, however, her heart tore with violent, numbing intensity. The overwhelming trust and passionate attachment that had burned from the very first moment of Vinny's protection now lay in ruins, replaced by shock, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. The mindset of a woman once desperately poor, suddenly lifted and protected by a wealthy, powerful man, had turned into extreme psychological shock. She felt used, exposed, and profoundly humiliated by the tests he had continued even after learning Tommy was his son. Vinny Moretti sat alone in a separate room, his powerful body still recovering from the injury, but the real wound was far deeper. The fair-skinned mafia boss gripped the edge of the table, his blue eyes shadowed with gnawing remorse that had grown into a consuming storm. The confession had been necessary, yet it had unleashed a violent emotional conflict within him. He had tested Emily, watched her share her meager resources, her stories of cold nights and powerless desperation, while hiding the full extent of his wealth and influence. The disparity between his luxurious life and her absolute misery, struck him with fresh brutality. Remorse tore at him violently. How could he have risked losing the family he had only just begun to know? His passionate, protective love for Emily and the children burned with painful intensity, creating a compelling focal point of torment. The father-child bond with Tommy felt especially fragile now, the boy's innocent healing words from the rescue echoing like accusations in his mind. Later that morning, the emotional fallout began to spread. Tommy sensed the tension immediately. The 10-year-old approached his mother with worried eyes, clutching his faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap. "Mom, why is Dad so quiet? Did we do something wrong?" Emily pulled her son close, her voice breaking softly. "No, sweetheart. This is between the grown-ups. But we are still family." The words brought a moment of condensed emotional stillness, yet they could not hide the violent tearing in her heart. She felt dizzy and numb, her balance unsteady as anxiety and fear overwhelmed her. The humiliating poverty she had endured for so long, thin, sleep-deprived, enduring endless cold winds and unjust hardships, now felt compounded by the deception. She had opened her life, offered her trust, only to discover she had been part of another test. In the days that followed, Emily made the painful decision to create distance. She gathered the children and returned with them to a temporary safe apartment arranged through Vinny's discreet channels, though she insisted on minimal help to preserve her dignity. The separation tore at everyone. Vinny remained in the safe house, respecting her need for space, but the isolation amplified his inner turmoil. Later that night, alone in the quiet rooms, he paced restlessly. His remorse reached new depths of intensity. The powerful man who commanded loyalty and wealth now felt utterly powerless against the consequences of his own actions. The memory of Emily's shocked face and Tommy's innocent trust clashed violently with his guilt, leaving him in profound emotional upheaval. Weeks later, unreasonable and unjust situations continued to expose Emily's utter misery. Back in the new apartment, another absurd blow fell when the temporary landlord raised concerns about background checks and threatened to end the arrangement without clear reason. Emily stood there, her thin frame trembling, her voice soft and polite as she pleaded for understanding. "Please, sir. I have 3 children depending on me." The encounter left her dizzy with disorientation and numb with despair. The cold wind seemed to follow her everywhere, reminding her of the humiliating poverty she had barely escaped. She felt desperate and powerless once more, the passionate attachment she still carried for Vinny, now tangled with fear and confusion. Her inner world was violently torn apart, gratitude for the rescue mixed with the pain of deception, creating a storm that left her curled in silent tears after the children slept. Vinny learned of the new hardship through his network. The news intensified his gnawing remorse into a feverish conflict. He wanted to intervene fully, to use his immense wealth to end all struggles, yet he feared overwhelming her or pushing her further away. In his luxurious penthouse, to which he had returned under heavy guard, the contrast felt grotesque. Warm rooms, fine furnishings, and security surrounded him, while Emily and the children faced continued uncertainty. His passionate love and protective instinct burned hotter, but the violent inner tearing left him tormented. The father-child bond with Tommy haunted him most. He missed the boy's quiet strength and healing presence, the way Tommy had comforted him during the crisis. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Dad." The words echoed, deepening his remorse. Another tense street confrontation arose unexpectedly during this period of separation. Vinny, driven by concern for the family's safety, arranged a discreet meeting with associates near the south side to monitor the rival factions' movements. As the discussion unfolded in a shadowed lot, rival members appeared boldly from nearby alleys, their voices rising in heated accusations and demands. They blocked the street with vehicles, creating thick suspense as they questioned Vinny's reduced visibility and issued veiled warnings. "Your distractions are making you weak, Moretti. Step back or lose more than territory." Vinny faced them with calm authority, despite his lingering injury, his powerful presence diffusing the tension after long charged minutes. The rivals eventually withdrew, but the encounter left Vinny shaken not by fear for himself, but by the realization that his world continued to cast shadows over Emily and the children, even in separation. Emily heard fragments of the incident through cautious updates. Horror and anxiety surged through her, sending waves of dizziness and numbness. She nearly lost her balance while holding Lily, the violent intensity of her emotions escalating into confusion and guarded fear. The unfairness felt crushing. She had endured poverty's humiliations for years, found a glimmer of protection only to have deception and danger pull everything apart. In quiet moments of condensed emotional stillness, she held the children close, her soft voice whispering reassurance, yet her inner world remained numb with pain. Tommy and Lily asked about Vinny constantly. "When can we see Dad again?" Tommy would say, his innocent eyes searching his mother's face. Jamal, whose distrust had begun to fade, now watched with renewed wariness, adding another layer of tension. Emily's heart broke with each question. Her overwhelming attachment to Vinny, passionate and intense from the beginning, refused to vanish completely. But the deception had created a deep wound. She felt the mindset of someone once desperately poor, now caught between gratitude and betrayal. Extreme psychological shock that left her disoriented and guarded. For Vinny, the separation became a crucible of self-reflection. Later that night in his penthouse, surrounded by symbols of his immense wealth that now felt empty and mocking, he sat in silence. The remorse was all-consuming. The powerful mafia boss who had tested so many had failed the most important test of all, trust with his own family. The father-child bond with Tommy, forged in crisis and healing, now hung by a thread. His violent inner conflict raged. The desire to prove his love was real clashed with the fear that his actions had caused irreparable damage. He missed the children's kindness, Emily's gentle care, and the way they had begun to heal his emotional wounds. As the weeks stretched on, the emotional fallout deepened. Emily faced yet another unjust situation when her attempts to find steady work were complicated by subtle pressures from the rival faction's influence in the neighborhood. She returned home one evening, exhausted and defeated, her thin body shaking from hunger and fatigue. The humiliating reality of her lingering poverty tore at her with fresh violence. In that moment, she allowed herself a rare outburst of quiet tears, the inner tearing leaving her numb and broken. Vinny, learning of her continued struggles, felt his heart lit open wider. His passionate, protective love for Emily and the children created a compelling focal point of torment. He wanted to rush to them to end all hardship with his wealth and power, but he respected the distance she needed. The separation forced him to confront the consequences of his deception in their rawest form. In the quiet, emotional stillness between painful days, both Vinny and Emily wrestled with their hearts. Emily's trust had been badly shaken, yet the burning attachment from the first moments of protection lingered like a faint light. Vinny's remorse burned like fire, driving him toward a deeper resolve. The children, especially Tommy, remained the bridge, their innocent presence a reminder of what was at stake. The consequences of the confession had created a painful separation, but in the shadows of Chicago, the stage was set for one final decisive reckoning, where forgiveness, redemption, and the true strength of family would be tested like never before. Gray Chicago skies hung low over the temporary apartment, where Emily Thompson tried to create some sense of normalcy for the children. Her thin, malnourished frame moved with exhausted precision as she prepared a meager breakfast, the cold wind from an open crack in the window reminding her of too many humiliating nights of poverty and powerlessness. The emotional fallout from Vinny's confession had left deep scars. She felt confused, fearful, and guarded. Yet the passionate attachment that had burned from the very first moment of his protection refused to die completely. Her voice stayed soft and timid when she spoke to Tommy, Lily, and Jamal. "We will be okay. Just stay close to each other." Inside, however, her heart tore with violent, numbing intensity. The deception still stung sharply, mixing with gratitude for the rescue and fear for what Vinny's world truly meant for their future. The mindset of a woman once desperately poor, suddenly protected by a wealthy and powerful man, now left her in extreme psychological shock, dizzy spells of disorientation and waves of numbness that made her lose balance when the pain grew too sharp. Vincent Moretti, back in his luxurious Gold Coast penthouse, felt the separation like a physical wound deeper than the injury from the warehouse. The powerful mafia boss stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows staring at the glittering city he helped build, but his fair-skinned face reflected only torment. His gnawing remorse had become a consuming fire. The knowledge that his tests and hidden life had hurt Emily and the children, especially his own son Tommy, created violent emotional conflict that raged without mercy. His passionate, protective love for them burned with fierce intensity, creating a compelling focal point that clashed brutally with his guilt. The disparity between his immense wealth and Emily's continued struggles tore at him with increasing brutality, while he returned each night to warmth, security, and abundance. She still carried the marks of long-term malnutrition, sleep deprivation, and the memory of cold, wind-filled nights of utter misery. Weeks later, the rival faction launched its most aggressive move yet. Sensing Vinny's distraction and the fractures within his circle, the underboss orchestrated a coordinated assault on several of Vinny's legitimate construction sites across the South Side. At the same time, subtle but terrifying threats reached the neighborhood where Emily and the children were staying. Unreasonable and unjust panic spread. Families received warnings, businesses were pressured, and the air grew thick with fear. Emily learned of the escalating danger when a neighbor knocked frantically on her door one evening, whispering about men, asking questions about the woman connected to Moretti. Horror and anxiety surged through her thin body. She felt dizzy and numb, nearly collapsing as loss of balance overtook her. The violent tearing in her inner world escalated into pure terror for the children. Another absurdly unfair blow had struck. Her life of poverty and powerlessness now endangered others, simply because she had dared to accept help. Vinny received the reports while in his penthouse. The news triggered the ultimate crisis. His inner turmoil exploded into a storm of unprecedented intensity. The powerful man who had built an empire now faced an impossible choice. He could fight back with all his resources and risk dragging Emily and the children deeper into violence. Or he could make the ultimate sacrifice. Remorse and love clashed violently within him. The father-child bond with Tommy, forged through the boy's innocent healing words during the rescue, demanded he choose protection above power. In that moment of extreme psychological shock, Vinny made his decision. He would burn bridges with the darkest parts of his criminal empire. He would turn over critical evidence against the rival underboss to federal authorities, accepting potential consequences for himself, in exchange for immunity and protection for Emily and the children. The bold, shocking turning point unfolded later that night. Vinny arranged a secret meeting in a neutral industrial area on the edge of the city. As he stepped out of his vehicle, rival faction members appeared unexpectedly, their voices rising in tense, heated confrontation. They blocked the lot with several cars demanding he abandon his plans and surrender influence. The suspense stretched unbearably as accusations flew back and forth. Vinny stood firm, his powerful presence commanding even in vulnerability. "This ends tonight. My family will not pay for my past." The rivals pressed harder with bold threats, but no excessive violence erupted. The confrontation ended with the rivals retreating into the shadows, sensing the shift in Vinny's resolve. What followed was Vinny's ultimate sacrifice. In the hours after the confrontation, he delivered the evidence through trusted intermediaries, publicly distancing himself from the criminal elements that had defined his empire for years. The act nearly cost him everything. As word spread, a final desperate ambush was launched against him on a quiet South Side street. Rivals appeared suddenly from side alleys, their vehicles surrounding his car in a bold, unexpected move. Voices shouted demands and accusations in the tense standoff. Vinny stepped out to face them directly, buying time for his men to ensure the family's safety. In the charged moment, a shot rang out, not fatal but enough to wound him severely in the shoulder. Pain exploded through his body as he collapsed against his vehicle, blood staining his clothes. Tommy, Lily, and Jamal, who had been moved to a secure location nearby with Emily, somehow learned of the danger through frantic updates. Defying instructions, the children slipped out with Emily close behind, driven by love and fear. They reached Vinny just as the rivals withdrew under pressure from arriving authorities. Emily rushed to his side, her thin frame shaking with horror and anxiety. "Vinny, no." Her voice was soft, breaking with polite desperation, even as dizziness and numbness threatened to overwhelm her. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound while the children gathered close. In that raw, life-altering moment, the second major twist revealed itself with shocking clarity. Tommy placed the old pocket watch, Emily's family heirloom, into his father's blood-stained hand. The boy's voice, filled with innocent strength, cut through the chaos. "You saved us, Dad. Now let us save you. We're your family for real, no tests, no lies." Jamal, who had once warned Tommy against trusting powerful men, witnessed the selfless act and broke completely. Tears filled the 9-year-old's eyes as he stepped forward. "He stayed when it hurt. He's not like the others. He really cares about kids like us." Jamal's emotional turning point was profound, revealing deeper truths about the lives of disadvantaged children and shifting his distrust into fierce loyalty. Vinny, lying wounded on the cold pavement, felt his inner world shatter in the most transformative way. Extreme psychological shock, mixed with overwhelming fatherly love. The powerful mafia boss who had sacrificed his empire and nearly his life was being saved by the very children whose kindness had begun healing his emotional wounds. Remorse and gratitude clashed violently inside him, the inner tearing reaching its most intense peak. His passionate, protective love for Emily and the family burned brighter than ever, now purified by the ultimate act of vulnerability. The disparity between his former wealth and the simple, heartfelt care surrounding him in this moment of crisis struck him with breathtaking force. Emily held Vinny's hand, her own heart violently torn between fear for his life and a surging wave of overwhelming trust. The deception still hurt, but witnessing his willingness to destroy his old life for their safety created a profound shift. She felt dizzy with emotional upheaval, the mindset of someone once desperately poor, now seeing a powerful man choose love and protection above everything. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed as help arrived, tears streamed down her face. Her soft voice whispered, "You did this for us." The shocking twist, the mafia boss's total sacrifice, and the children's redemptive response changed the trajectory forever. Authorities moved in to secure the area, offering the protection Vinny had bargained for. Vinny was rushed to safety, his wounds serious but not fatal. The family stayed close, the children's innocent kindness continuing to heal him even as sirens echoed in the distance. Vinny's remorse had driven him to the brink, but the children's love, especially Tommy's healing presence and Jamal's turning point, pulled him back. Emily's passionate attachment, tested by deception and danger, now burned with renewed depth. The ultimate sacrifice had exposed the raw truth of their bonds. In the shadows of Chicago, a new path opened, one where power gave way to genuine family, and the wounds of the past began to heal through compassion and trust. Yet the final chapter of redemption still awaited, where forgiveness and a lasting father-child commitment would decide their future. Next morning, gentle sunlight streamed through the windows of the modest but secure new home on the south side of Chicago, a place Vinny had arranged with the protection granted after his sacrifice. Emily Thompson moved quietly in the kitchen, her once thin and malnourished frame now showing the first signs of rest and care. The long nights of cold wind and desperate hunger that had defined her life felt like a fading shadow. Yet the memory of that humiliating poverty still lingered in quiet moments, stirring deep emotions. She prepared breakfast for the children with hands that no longer trembled from exhaustion. Her voice stayed soft and timid when she called them to the table. "Come eat, my loves. We are together now." Inside her heart, however, the tearing had not fully subsided. The confession, the separation, and the ultimate sacrifice had left her in waves of lingering confusion and guarded fear, even as an overwhelming surge of trust and attachment burned passionately from the very first moment Vinny had shown her kindness. Vinny Moretti sat at the head of the table, his powerful frame still bearing the scars of his wounds, but his blue eyes held a new depth of peace mixed with gnawing remorse. The wealthy and powerful man who had once commanded empires now lived a quieter life, his immense wealth redirected toward legitimate construction projects that actually helped rebuild neighborhoods rather than control them. The violent inner conflict that had raged within him for so long had begun to soften, yet moments of intense remorse still surfaced when he looked at Emily and the children. He had given up the darkest parts of his old world, accepting the consequences with quiet dignity. His passionate, protective love for Emily and the family created a compelling focal point, no longer tainted by tests or deception but purified through sacrifice and truth. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Emily and Vinny sat together in the living room during a moment of condensed emotional stillness. The unfair events that had once torn at Emily's life, the endless struggles, the absurdly unjust threats, the humiliating poverty now felt distant, yet the emotional scars remained. She spoke softly, her voice polite and trembling with vulnerability. "I was so angry after the confession. It hurt deeply to know I had been tested even after you knew about Tommy. But watching you risk everything, seeing you choose us over power, that changed something inside me." Vinny listened, his heart tearing with fresh intensity as remorse washed over him. The disparity between his former life of luxury and Emily's years of deprivation, thin, deprived of food, deprived of sleep, enduring many cold nights, still haunted him. Yet in this quiet space, forgiveness began to bloom. Emily's overwhelming attachment, passionate and intense, finally outweighed the pain, allowing her to see the man beneath the mistakes. Weeks later, the family faced one final tense confrontation that tested their new beginning. Rival remnants, unwilling to accept Vinny's withdrawal, appeared unexpectedly on a South Side street during a simple family outing to a local park. Their voices rose in bold accusations, blocking the path with vehicles and demanding he reconsider his choices. The suspense thickened as Vinny stepped forward calmly. No longer the man who ruled through fear, but one who protected through resolve. "My family and I are building something better here. There is no going back." The rivals eventually withdrew after long charged moments, their threats losing power against Vinny's quiet strength and the visible unity of the family. Emily felt a surge of anxiety during the encounter, dizziness and numbness threatening her balance, but she stood beside Vinny, her trust now steady. The event highlighted how wealth and poverty could never truly separate love and compassion when hearts chose humanity over division regardless of skin color or background. In the following months, the healing deepened through everyday moments, rich with life lessons. Tommy, now thriving with proper medical care and a stable home, continued to teach his father the most profound truths. One afternoon in the park, the boy looked up at Vinny and said, "Dad, you showed me that real strength comes from caring, not from being the strongest." Vinny felt a powerful wave of emotion, his remorse transforming into gratitude as he embraced the knowledge that compassion could heal even the deepest wounds. The lesson of choosing family over power became clear in Tommy's innocent wisdom, offering an education in true fatherhood that no amount of wealth could replace. Emily watched with tears in her eyes, her own inner world, finding peace as she absorbed the knowledge that love transcends past mistakes and social divides. The lesson of forgiveness brought an education in resilience, showing that even someone who had endured absolute poverty could rise through genuine connection. Lily and Jamal also played vital roles in the family's growth. Jamal, whose distrust had once created tension, now openly shared stories of his difficult childhood, revealing how Vinny's sacrifice had given him hope. In quiet evenings around the table, the children's laughter filled the home, creating many moments of condensed emotional stillness. Yet absurdly unfair echoes of the past occasionally surfaced: a minor neighborhood dispute or a lingering threat that reminded Emily of her former powerlessness, but each time the family faced them together, turning pain into strength. Vinny's wealth, once a source of isolation, now funded community projects and support for families like the one he had rescued, emphasizing that true riches lie in compassion. These experiences brought the knowledge that kindness can bridge any gap between rich and poor, delivering a powerful lesson in humility and an education in shared humanity that touched every heart in the household. 10 years later, the family had grown stronger in ways no one could have imagined. Vinny had fully embraced a legitimate life, focused on building better neighborhoods, his past power transformed into positive influence. Emily, no longer the desperate and impoverished woman fighting alone, had found purpose, helping others in similar situations, her gentle strength inspiring many. Tommy now, a young man, stood tall beside his father, their bond unbreakable. Lily and Jamal had become integral parts of the family, their lives enriched by the love that knew no boundaries of skin color or social standing. The once violent tearing in Vinny's heart had evolved into profound peace, his remorse replaced by the deep satisfaction of redemption. Emily's passionate attachment had blossomed into enduring trust, proving that wealth and poverty could never separate genuine love and compassion when rooted in shared humanity. Through every challenge and every quiet victory, the family discovered valuable life lessons. They gained the knowledge that true protection comes from vulnerability and honesty rather than control. They learned the lesson that forgiveness heals both the giver and the receiver, providing an education in emotional freedom. They internalized the knowledge that compassion is the strongest force, offering a powerful lesson in resilience and an education in building lasting family bonds. They embraced the knowledge that love rises above all divisions, teaching the lesson of unity and delivering an education in the beauty of second chances. Finally, they carried the knowledge that every sacrifice made for others creates ripples of hope, imparting the lesson of selflessness and an education in living with purpose. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like, and share it so you can enjoy many engaging videos every day. How did this story make you feel? How does it connect to real life and the challenges you or your loved ones have faced? Please share your thoughts and emotions in the comments below so the creator can listen to the feelings from deep within the viewers' hearts. We read every comment with care and appreciation. Goodbye for now, and we promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.